Yo. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Your Therapist Needs Therapy. I'm your host, Jeremy Schumacher, licensed marriage and family therapist, back with another solo episode. My release schedule and recording schedule is all sorts of janky because I've been sick and I've had a partner who's been sick and I have had kids who have been sick. It has just been a brutally dry, cold winter, which has led to a plethora of illnesses. And here I am, healthy and recovered, but not with any recorded episodes, with any guests. So we're just going to talk about what has been on my mind and what has been hindering my mental health in spirit with the point of the podcast, which is Your Therapist Needs Therapy. And just a reminder, I do have a therapist. They're wonderful and particularly helpful. I do try and practice what I preach. Last time, speaking of preaching, we talked a little bit about how Christian nationalism is neither Christian nor nationalism. It is white supremacy nativism, and it's not a new idea. It is literally has been done before. And you're like, yeah, Ronald Reagan, he said, make America great again, and then ruined everything, which is true, but actually goes back into the 50s and late 40s, just with the Klan, literally the white supremacy movement. And the thing that has sort of happened, and I guess just a continuation from that conversation of like, this isn't new. There was a Christian nationalist crusade. There was an actual political party, the Christian Nationalist party. They had a platform. They ran for president and didn't do well because they were overtly racist. They were deeply tied to the Klan, but so is the Republican Party, right? Like David Duke, Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, ran as a Republican and won a governorship. Like, we haven't done a great job of limiting that. I've been talking to some older folks than I am who remember Pat Buchanan because he's a political figure I was alive for. He ran for president in 92. And I think 96, but maybe to less fanfare. But it's not somebody I really remember, but like causes stress for the older folks who like lived through that. And in reading A Field Guide to White Supremacy, which is sort of an anthology series from a lot of really great journalists and writers and people who care about well-being and its constant attack under authoritarianism. One of the chapters in that book is really how sort of white supremacy went from fringe to mainstream. And it really highlights like that Pat Buchanan presidential run and the presidencies between Reagan leading to Trump that Buchanan sort of normalized and created this movement that is viewed as populist, which is what Trump runs on, lowering the cost of eggs and things that might be popular, even though he has that's not what his platform actually is. He's just lying. And the white supremacist stuff like replacement theory and immigration causing crime and poor people instead of rich people taking your jobs. And, a lot of the class war stuff that is not talked about nearly enough because we're busy with culture war bullshit. And Reagan did that, right? Like Reagan was not a good human, nor did he have strong morals. He was an actor and an opportunist. So, Trump. But I think one of the things that people criticize, well, but again, miss the point. And this is not like Jeremy knows better than everyone else, but this is just like how many times I have these conversations on a weekly basis as we all are coexisting through this time of moral injury and cultural wound and just some horrific bullshit. And like voting isn't enough. And so coming together with community is really important, but like we need these communities to be having the right conversations. And one of the conversations that I think is really missing is insightful media critique. I think liberals in like the American sense, which are really conservatives, but like not racists, not overt racist. Um, like the CNN, MSN, what the MAG movement would refer to as mainstream media, really did a just terrible job. And so they sanewashed Trump, they normalized Trump in 2016, and then they made Trump not seem like a senile, old, racist, terrible human in 2020 and 2024 because he gets a lot of clicks. But again, like you can criticize the media, but looking through the lens of a little bit of a more historical perspective and saying, how did we get here? A lot of it is a uniquely American issue, not uniquely American. There's been a move to the authoritarian right in other countries because it's because of capitalism. Like that's why, because things suck. Because that's what happens in capitalism. Late stage capitalism is the end of a civilization, the hoarding of mass wealth. Um, we're not doing enough to slow or even stop the climate change, and so people are frustrated. People are scared, and it's really easy for authoritarianism to rise during that time. But what happens, the sort of a uniquely American thing is we, not uniquely American, like Russia did this first, which is like, maybe we have a Russian asset as a president. So that makes a lot of sense. At least someone who has some blackmail against them from the Russian state. So, we have next to no media protections in America. So other countries have a lot of consumer protections. We have very few. Which ones we had before 2024 are being hacked away at because again we have a real estate mogul, which is someone who has profited off of stealing land and then charging people for it, and a tech bro. I don't know. Like Elon Musk is neither good at tech or running businesses. I don't know. We have two con men in charge of things. And so, of course, they're going to run things into the ground. And where other countries can step in here is like one of the things that's wild with other countries. Like you can't advertise to children. You can't have cereal commercials for kids. You can't have other things that are marketed just to children because children do not have money, and therefore you cannot market to them because that they don't have money. Like so, they're a protected class of citizen, and so you can't market your shitty little sugar-filled cereal to them. And other countries have consumer protections, like you can't have shitty sugar-filled cereal on the shelves. You can't have red 40 and everything because it causes cancer. And so the consumer protections and a lot of the media and advertising things that exist in other countries don't exist in America. And what happened is the rise of Fox News, right? Like Fox Entertainment, as they're legally known, because they don't do news. Like in court, when push comes to shove and we talk about legal standards, they're an entertainment company, not a news company. And yet, if you turn on Fox, it says Fox News in the corner still. Like it's such a stupid, genuinely dumb system we live in because it is driven by profit and not looking at it doesn't even look at people as resources. Like again, we're in late stage capitalism. They've lost the plot here on like we need people to have enough money to be able to buy stuff if capitalism is going to exist, to just the meat grinder of like churning people out. And so yeah, we don't have any media protections, and so we have someone in Trump, and we have another someone in Musk, who get in front of camera and lie, and nothing happens. Like it gets a ton of media play, and we've had things like TMZ, and we've had other stuff, but like you can look at some of the media sphere in the right wing. And just see like they live in an alternate reality truly. Like yes, it's dumb. Their media literacy is low. They're deeply uninformed and misinformed. There's research that came out in the 20 teens. I don't remember when, but it showed empirically that you were more informed of what's going on in the world by not watching anything than if you watched Fox News. Fox News actually made you less informed than if you didn't participate in consuming any news at all. And so again, like that media sphere being allowed to exist, not being sued, not being held accountable in any meaningful way for decades has led to a lot of the brain rot that has happened. And the right-wing media sphere now is just like, I mean, objectively, provably paid for by Russian money, like Tim Pool and I think it was Stephen Crowder. The other one, Dave Rubin, all took a bunch of Russian money and they claim ignorance. Who knows where our funding's coming from, but they're getting like millions of dollars for their shitty little YouTube channels. So like, I don't know. Other leftist YouTubers have said like, if we got that amount of money, we would have to look into where it is because that level of money does not exist here. And the grift, right? Like, so then you had the white supremacists in the 50s who were mad about segregation, and you had the religious right kind of come in there because they were also mad about segregation because white supremacy and the church are intrinsically linked. That's a stance I can very easily defend, but has a super long history, so we're not going to get into it today. Maybe another series for another day. It's like not fun to talk about this stuff. So for my own mental health, I don't know how much time I want to spend on all of these things. But so we have the grift, right? We have the trickle down economics crowd, the corporate interests, and not even the corporate interests at this point, just like true oligarchy, because the Democrat Party is corporate interests. Like it was corporatists versus oligarchs in 2024 in America. We don't have a leftist party. We certainly don't have a progressive party, and we don't have a resistance party right now. So I don't know what to do with that. That's the dead end of where I'm like, take care of your mental health. But then, so white supremacy, Christianity are deeply linked. And then the right-wing misinformation machine and Christianity also have linked up. And so you get someone who's a serial rapist like Russell Brand, finding God, wearing Jesus outfits, leading prayers that are like awkward and you can tell he doesn't know what he's talking about and it's just purely performative. Same with like Trump saying like 1 Corinthians because he's never actually read the Bible and so he doesn't know how to read from the differently numbered books of the Bible. And he holds the Bible upside down and he frowns in church when a bishop says, the Bible says to take care of poor people and welcome aliens. And so yeah, you have this tolerance in America for lies. We have very poor protections on that, and we have very weak libel laws and things like that. So you can say what you want to say and get away with it. The things I'm saying here are, you know, I'm a small YouTube channel and a professional therapist, so like not worried about being sued, but like allegedly on these things, I suppose. Right, and that's it. Like you just say allegedly, and so I say this, and if this video gets 35 views on YouTube, and the podcast gets a couple hundred downloads, like cool, no one cares, right? Like I don't have ads on my podcast because my podcast is not big enough for it. So there's some safety in being unknown, I guess. But if you're Pat McAfee or you're Joe Rogan or you're Andrew Huberman, it's another piece of shit. Might be a lovely human, but is like a huge cog in the disinformation machine. Then you say these things and you throw in the word allegedly, or I don't know, I'm just an idiot. And that gets you out of any legal ramifications, even though there's very obvious things that are going on when someone like Rogan talks about hydroxychloroquine or ivermectin or Aaron Rodgers is talking about chemtrails, or RFK is, I don't know, I was going to say promoting heroin and brainworms, but I guess I don't know that he's actively promoted either of those things. But both of those things do contribute a lot to explaining where he's at, and money, right? Just being born rich. Um, but so you have this right-wing media grift that's Christian, right? So now you have Turning Point USA with Charlie Kirk, and you have Crowder's outfit, and you have, which, like, again, it's just a bunch of like sexual harassment and closeted gay guys sexually harassing each other because they have to be Christian and they're deeply unhappy and they don't understand consent because they're probably raised Christian. I don't know what they were raised, but yeah, Crowder's had a bunch of issues with sexually harassing people related to penis and testicle humor in the form of, touching, groping, flashing, whatever, I went to a Christian high school, and yeah, like, it's not a lot of more gay spaces than a boys' locker room in a Christian school. We weren't even an all-boys school, and it was still very prevalent there because you're taking a bunch of hormonal teens and saying, if you have normal, natural lust, you're going to hell, though they act out. And I'm not defending it. I'm saying it's a terrible system. Anyway, so Turning Point USA, we have whatever Jordan Peterson is doing. I think he's working for Turning Point USA. He's lost his professorship and his ability to practice anything approaching psychotherapy. So I think he's fully in on the grift. Has been for a while, but I think even technically anything approaching being a licensed professional has dissipated in his life. Because there's true accountability when you're like licensed, right? Like when you're a licensed therapist and you do something bad, you lose your license. When you're an ordained priest and you serially rape children, you just get moved to a different parish because there's no actual accountability there. When you're a media person and you own the UFC and you punch your wife on camera, like, nothing happens because there's no accountability there. When you own a professional wrestling company and your wife becomes the Secretary of Education, and you've sexually trafficked people and harassed them for decades, then your case is dismissed. So, what a fun time to be alive. So there's no accountability in these things in the church, in the media ecosystem, for rich people in general. And so when we put those things together, it goes quite poorly, right? Like, you have some of these slight moves that build what becomes the QAnon, some of the 9/11 truther stuff, and these documentaries that are far more based in entertainment than anything. The God's Not Dead, Fast and Furious series, that's just a joke on how many God's Not Dead movies there are. I don't think Fast and Furious has Christian overtones. I've certainly never watched it because they look awful. And so we have stuff like this, and then you get Chris Pratt, like, sort of repping Hillsong or Justin Bieber or whoever have repped these deeply problematic mega churches and like make it seem like cool. And like Chris Pratt seems really likable, and then he's like, I'm gonna divorce my wife because we have a kid with special needs, and like, look at this other chick I got pregnant and she gave me healthy kids, so I love her more. Like, right, he's an awful human. Like, and that's because there's no accountability. He just keeps making movies, right? Like, ta-da. So there's this whole like media machine, and then there's like the pop culture stuff. Like, I'm picking on Chris Pratt here because, again, he has overtly said that his wife, that he has a child with special needs with, he left so he could have healthy kids, which makes him, again, just as awful. It's just a horrible thing to say out loud. A horrible thing to think or believe, let alone feel confident in yourself to say it out loud. And we have like this country music stuff, like, try that in a small town. Bro, your small town is being decimated by your Republican legislature. Like, I don't know what to tell you why you're bad at liberalism. It is truly you voting against your own best interests. Um, and so, yeah, it's we just don't protect people against this stuff, and then we let people who want to take advantage of people make decisions to not protect them. Like putting Linda McMahon in charge of the Department of Education is like wild. She's she was the department chair of small business in Trump's first administration, and like didn't ruin a ton as far as I know. I don't think she's particularly effective, and certainly didn't get anything useful done. But like her husband owns WWF, like WWE now. But like that's that's how she has her money. She's not a successful business person. She's a media. She's married to a media person, and a horrible one at that, right? Like a horrible person. So yeah, my point is we don't have accountability for rich people or for the church and for corporate interests that then link themselves to the church. They want to claim persecution. And so like right, and Christianity is a whole long millennia long um, run at like poor us, we've been persecuted. The Romans put us to death in the Colosseum, which like is factually inaccurate. Like there's no evidence that Christians were ever persecuted or killed at any rate other than any other group of people. Like people died in the Colosseum, and like Nero was crazy, and so was Caligula, and like shit happened, but it was never like, oh fuck Christians. Like if anything, Christianity has gotten a boost from politics over and over and over again, starting with Constantine and then running through the Catholic Church. And throughout that time, like Christianity has been a net loss. Like it's been awful for society to have Christianity as like an allowable thing. The Crusades, the Catholic Church just writ large across history, hoarding wealth, colonizing places in the name of mission work, stealing from other cultures, killing people, raping children. Again, like if you can name a club that has sexually assaulted hundreds of thousand children in the last decade and continues to exist in every major metropolis and most small towns in America, that list is one, right? It's the Catholic Church, and like it's and maybe some other like other religious groups, right? Like there's not the Catholic Church doesn't have a stranglehold on this. Pick a denomination and Google sex scandal and just filter for recent results, and you're going to get them, right? Like within the past month or two, but certainly within the last year. So like again, just no accountability there, and like defaulting for these things and then claiming that you're the persecuted group, right? So like that's the Darvo, right? Deny, attack, reverse victim and offender, right? Like that's what people who are abusing people do. They claim to be the victims, and like that's just sort of what America is right now. Like we're in an abusive relationship with wealthy people. We're in an abusive relationship with the church, and that's what Christian nationalism is. Like not your average MAGA person in Kentucky. Like they're poor, they're being victimized by this, but the people who are running the show and have really orchestrated the movement very intentionally to include religious aspects because it is convenient for their cause because it's baked in. People who are religious have been primed to accept an abusive leader because they've been accepting it in their bishops and archdioceses and preachers and who's that gremlin who has a shit ton of money. It's not limiting it by saying a gremlin pastor who has Kenneth Copeland. Um, but like pick a mega pastor, right? Joel Osteen, like Billy Graham. He's dead, but lots of people. Not Billy Graham. Yeah, Billy Graham. No, I'm thinking of the pro wrestler. superstar Billy Graham is a pro wrestler. Who is the, the 700 Club guy? You guys know who I'm talking about. So I don't know. Yeah, the media is complicit. I think people are missing the point that like the media is pretty unregulated and owned by corporate interests, right? Like you can look at Bezos buying Washington Post recently, and like that's a very easy, obvious example. But like other ones have existed. Most media has been owned by about 5 corporations since like the 90s. So this is not a new phenomenon. And because it's not new or interesting or headline grabbing, like we just sort of skip over that part that like it shouldn't be allowable for people to lie and get away with it with no consequences. There isn't any accountability. There isn't any accountability in media. There's not accountability for wealthy people. There's not accountability for the church. And so when we have a movement that is tying a predominantly online media-driven movement of wealthy people who are using Christianity, like, yep, there's no accountability there. We saw that with the legal system failing. We see that with, places giving money to political movements that they shouldn't be, places that are untaxed, spending their money on political capital. Like it's just a general lack of accountability. And we think somehow that the media provides that accountability when the media is not just complicit in it, but is part of what creates that lack of accountability. So, be aware of your sources. I don't have, the problem with talking about this stuff that's going on currently is there isn't a nice, clean, easy wrap up. Like, I don't have the answer, obviously. Like, it's a systematic dismantling of things over decades. And so there isn't a nice, neat, easy answer. Support independent journalism and be wary of your own implicit biases in media consumption, and don't trust the algorithms because they're owned and they're manipulated. Like just being aware of some of that stuff and supporting people who are doing good independent journalism is really important. Like your local TV station is owned by Sinclair Broadcasting, like big percentage, like highly statistically likely that that's true. And that means you're not getting actual reporting or journalism. So like doing, being aware of like where you're getting your information, I think is the bare minimum. And if you are resourced to support places that are interested in holding or creating some level of accountability, even like for content creators, right? There's like an accountability network that content creators can join, and like that's good. And like I'm a licensed professional. There's accountability there because my license can be revoked for things. So yeah, be wary of places where there isn't accountability, like your church. I don't know that people who go to church are listening to my podcast. Like your family members' churches and your former church. Go to your local town hall when your politicians host them and yell at them, because that's a little bit of accountability, if not a lot. Go to local protests. There's good organizing going on. Connect to your community. There are more of us than there are of these shitty, awful people ruining things and making life difficult for marginalized communities. We do need to organize. Find your local organization. I don't even know about like posting that stuff in the show notes. I'm not opposed to it. I don't know how much I want to help organize and help people get there. And also like we're, at that like stage of fascism of like deporting protesters. So take care of yourselves. When I end the show and say, take care of yourself, take some care of someone else, I usually mean like in a mental health perspective, but like make sure you're plugged into your local community and that you're safe and that people in your community are also safe. Take care of yourself, take care of somebody else. We'll be back with a more regular schedule soon, not immediately, but soon. We'll be back on track with guests and some lighthearted content, maybe. But maybe it's just all going to be how do we survive horrific times. So, look forward to that. All right, y'all, take care. Peace.